Hi everyone, this is Ellen Long. Today I'm going to discuss the idea of moving beyond a research paper to encourage student engagement in assignments. So my discussion will focus on ideas that I've implemented in the classroom, ideas that I plan to implement in the classroom, and ideas provided by the Director of Instructional Support at Spartanburg Community College, Susan Moore. Susan and I presented on this topic at the Georgia International Conference on Information Literacy in February of 2020. So this discussion is just a condensed version of that presentation. Dr. Bailey, the director of the CTLI, plans to open this topic to discussion as well. So I really look forward to hearing your perspective on this topic and how these concepts can apply to your classroom. I know so many of our instructors already present creative assignments, and I really can't wait to hear more about them. So first, we're going to take a look at some of the research related to today's topic. Allison Head, the Director of Project Information Literacy, noted in the report, Assigning Inquiry, How Handouts for Research Assignments Guide Today's College Students, that most students lack a seminal understanding about what conducting research means as a form of intellectual inquiry and discovery. Ways to consider helping students gain that understanding include acknowledging that research has changed in the digital age, modes of presenting final assignments and presenting research have changed, and many institutions of higher education have a renewed focus on preparing students for the workforce. So, how do we as instructors move from what we know to something new? Some scholars note that instructors tend to rely on written assignments and exams when faced with large classes, student expectations, or traditional assessment models. Viewing assignments as creative often feels out of place in a higher education setting. As Nikki Dunkel argues in the article, The Transformative Potential of Creative Assignments in Higher Education, creativity and critical thinking are often perceived as residing at opposite ends of a spectrum. This reinforces a false dichotomy. The author and I agree that you can't have creativity without critical thinking, and vice versa. Additionally, various scholars contend that creativity is a necessary skill in the workplace, and implementing creative strategies in the classroom can help instructors adapt to the changing needs of students in a higher education setting. Creative assignments can also teach the standard of a student's field or another important skill needed in a student's field. In my courses, I identify collecting and evaluating sources and pieces of information and conducting a critical analysis as important research-based skills with a real-world application. Next, let's consider assignment design. So if we set the goal for ourselves to engage students in a more creative research project, we also need to figure out how to formulate this assignment for students. Since we're all familiar with the concept of backwards by design, moving from course objectives or curricular goals to the assessment and then to the instruction, we can apply this model. We can also use our knowledge of scaffolding assignments, which uses low-stake assignments that build to a final higher stakes assignment or project in order to allow the instructional process to unfold as we build the final creative research project for our own courses. This means that we aren't throwing our students into the deep end when they're learning how to swim. Another way to think about this is to view assignments as a journey. In the article Writing Without Words, Sharon Stoeger presents her experience in taking a research-based essay assignment and transforming it into a visually rich, data-driven infographic. In this process, Stoeger poses critical questions to guide her assignment design process, including: what is the experience to design? What is the final destination? And what is the takeaway for students? These questions can help instructors incorporate creative assignments within their curricular goals and to highlight the purpose of the assignment. Stoeger challenges her instructional abilities by placing these questions within the context of a journey for students. When thinking about assignment design as a journey, one in which instructors lead students, transforming assignments, specifically those which reinforce understanding, practice, and application of information literacy skills, it becomes a practice in critical thinking for the instructor as well. Stoeger continues her analogy by stating that students must receive maps or directions, tools or resources to complete their assignment, and stops along the way to the final destination. This is another way to think about the assignment scaffolding, where these stops become proposals, drafts, conferences, and so on. As with all journeys, though, there are going to be hurdles and challenges. Students might express anxiety or fear when tasked with a creative assignment. So ask yourself how you plan to address this in your instruction. Combine, curate, or interact with course materials and information in new or original ways. Develop skills that complement workforce needs. Consider whether a creative assignment accomplishes your learning goals better than a traditional assignment. Require students to cite faithfully and appropriately, which might require that students submit something written like a bibliography. And share your discipline's debates on originality and source use with your students. Examples of creative research assignments or projects that you might consider include lightning talks. So lightning talks allow students to present research in a short time frame. It's like an abbreviated panel presentation at a conference. This is similar to how I conduct presentations for projects in my classes. Some guidelines that I include are a 5-minute maximum for each student. Students need to advance the slides on their own in order to make a conscious decision about how they structure their presentation, and I use an oral presentation, but you could easily do a recorded video presentation. Infographics are another great creative research assignment. They allow students to present a lot of information in a small space and engage the visual design aspect. The infographic on the left focuses on narrative and query as a research process. The infographic itself contains links to sources for review, so students can add links to their sources that they're citing or additional reading if they wanted to. The infographic on the right teaches a process. So the infographic on the right is something that I plan to incorporate in an upcoming course. I task some of my students with learning about expository writing by teaching their reader to do something to teach a process. So an end result that wouldn't necessarily be an essay, but still requires understanding all of the components of that, having a main point, having supporting details, having a clear message, presenting that message to an audience, and so on, could be accomplished through an infographic. Because infographics provide a lot of information in a small space, you do see these frequently on social media platforms. Both of these examples come from Instagram. What you'll note with both of them is that they are focused on important topics, but that information is presented in a concise manner that almost anyone could understand, which is just another benefit of practicing the infographic assignment. Job aids are also a creative research-based assignment that students could accomplish. A job aid could be a checklist, a flowchart, so on. Both of these examples come from the Common Learning Portal at the National Park Service website. So the image on the left is a flowchart that would show extensive knowledge of a program. The image on the right is a checklist that would help someone complete a task. In the image on the right, you can actually see some of the sources that the author has referenced. Concept maps are another option for presenting a more creative-based assignment. Concept mapping isn't a new technique though, so I use concept mapping in several different courses as a pre-writing exercise, but you could use this technique as a way to show how the points of a research project are connected, how events are connected, how sources are connected, and so on. So the image on the right is a handout of a concept map template that I provide for my students when they're working on their inquiry-based research essay. In this assignment, students practice writing a research question, conducting secondary source research to identify answers to those questions, and then utilize their critical thinking skills to discuss a common ground between different answers and lead to an answer for their own research question. While this is a pre-writing exercise, I could easily transform this into a research project and have students use a program like PowerPoint in order to present their research. On the left, you can see that PowerPoint's Smart Art option also allows students to create a concept map using the relationships option. These images are generated in PowerPoint. They can be manipulated to change the relationship between 2 points, and text is easily added. The Center for Teaching and Learning at BYU also has an informative webpage on how to create and use concept maps in class, and on that webpage they offer other suggestions for online programs that you can use. Another example of a creative research project is a timeline. There are 2 examples on this slide, and several tools you can use to help create timelines include Google Slides, PowerPoint, and a program called Satori. Lastly, I'm going to briefly talk about critical analysis. I don't have an image example of an assignment to go with this one, but I have previously tasked students with conducting a critical analysis of the history and culture of limestone. My students were asked to consider how monuments and exhibits highlight campus priorities, achievements, and communicate culture to students. While the final product of this assignment was a proposal essay that did not contain research, students were required to participate in a pre-writing exercise that allowed them to consider research and critical analysis concepts. They were required to conduct research by using the written and recorded history of the college. They were required to walk to monuments and campus exhibits and read them, understand them, make note about what they say. And they were required to ask themselves a critical question of what is missing. So a lot of times researchers are tasked with identifying a gap in the scholarship. This is what I ask my students to do as well. They had to analyze what they saw and read in order to identify what was missing on campus or what gap exists in order to make their proposal. So these are just a few examples of how we can move from a research essay to a creative research project when appropriate. So what ideas would you like to share? What examples do you have? And how can you apply this discussion to your classes?